Yo, what's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to a brand new episode of For the Love of Humankind. And as always, my name is Jeff. You can find me on Twitter at JC with the Shot. You can find me on Instagram at This Is Jay Cox. And you can catch me streaming on Twitch at JC with the Shot as well. So I want to welcome you back to the continuation of our multi-part series in which we started in our last episode, the Spoken Hearts Project. So, just to do a really quick recap before we go into the intro video and start this lovely episode off, we talked a lot about, what my life was like growing up. Talked about some very key events such as me being adopted, going through a depressive phase and, thinking about, taking my own life. And there were a lot of things that made me who I am today. And this multi-part series is to talk about that and show you all why I am at the point in my life where I'm at, creating this podcast, for example. And so I welcome you back. If you haven't watched part one yet, go ahead and watch part one, then come back and watch this part. But again, welcome back, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome back. So, I'm super excited to continue this conversation. The Spoken Hearts Project, part two, if you will. And so where we left off in the last episode, I spent some time talking about middle school, and I talked about, what it was like going through and feeling like I was, being bullied, and how that affected my mental health and my state of, really where I was at and how I really viewed a lot of things in life. And so we left off going into ninth grade, and so high school for me was interesting, for lack of a better phrase, as it is for most people, right? But I had a lot of ups and downs and times that I don't know that I can really understand and grasp what exactly happened. And I don't say that because I found it traumatic. Although there were times that, definitely traumatized, like I spoke about in the last episode. But I just don't know if I knew who I was in high school. Ninth grade came. I played basketball and I played baseball. We had a freshman team that I played on for both. I wasn't particularly great at either sport, but I was good enough to be able to play. And I didn't always start when I played basketball. I typically started when I played baseball, but basketball I didn't always start. I was always seen as coming off the bench with a lot of energy, and as my soccer coach would later say, in high school, I was running around like a bull in the china shop, because I really would just play so hard that I really didn't care like who got in my way, and I was just like, all right, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and if you get in my way, that kind of sucks, because as I said, I was a beefier boy around that time period, and I still am. I'm still a beefy boy, but basketball has always been one of my true loves in life, and got me through a lot of things. I can go to practice and like just sprint and not think about things. And then I'd go home and I'd be like, shit, I'm in so much pain. Uh, this is not what I want. Um, but it was one of those things that I didn't have to think about, you know, terrible shit at the time. I also had some really good friends on the team that, were huge supporters of me. Um, and I knew that we're there through whatever, right? Um, but going into high school was interesting because I had been already in high school technically, in seventh and eighth grade. So the biggest part of going into ninth grade was where my locker was at for the next 4 years. Like it determined our hallway, right? And that was really the biggest part. Like I was still walking the same halls, still the same people. In a high school where you have 350 total kids between 7th through 12th, like everybody knows everybody. Like you don't get away or escape from these people. Not that it's necessarily a bad thing, but like as I talked about in the last episode, like my eighth grade year like was not great. You know, um, I think that's really when I started to notice where my mental health was more important than a lot of things. Um, and in ninth grade, I um, found myself in a couple of relationships. Um, I was still going to youth group. Um, but in ninth grade is also when I really started going to church on Sundays. Um, that's really where I found like my in with religion, right? I mentioned in the last episode that um, I attempted to take my life in eighth grade, and there are things in my life that I attribute to helping me get past that. And church was one of those things. Um, I was going to youth group up until about ninth grade, and then, I was struggling with my mental health, and in between eighth and ninth grade year, I had the opportunity to go to um, church summer camp with some of my friends, and I was like, heck yes, let's go. Where I would spend a week with them doing different things. And also during that ninth grade year, there was a like 3-day like concert series mixed with like gosh, what's the word I want to use? Mixed with like testimonies and different like religious leaders that would give keynotes. And I really found a place to connect there. I cried a lot. I talked about the sins that I had caught, or that I had. I talked about where I was struggling with understanding who I am, and how like I just continue to live in this shitty world. And I attribute being alive to those times, to going to that concert series, to going to church camp, to making friends, not just at my school or in my church, but from churches across Michigan. That's where I met a lot of my best friends, was through that. Um, and there are some of them that I still talk to today, which I think is a big testament. Um, neither the new or old. Um, Although my favorite is both. I can't really decide. But I found a community there. And for those of you that know me, you probably know that church is no longer something that's in my repertoire or my life. It's not something that I attend. Um, and that's something that changed throughout high school. And I'll kind of talk about that here in a little bit. But ninth grade year was huge for me because I think it was a really big transition point from where I was in, not necessarily having a tremendous amount of friends. Like I had quite a few friends, but that's what you get when you grow up with people, right? Like you're surrounded by them all the time, and I was able to branch out and make friends from different cities and different churches and connect with them and understand that they were also going through some of the same things that I was struggling with. I often had these friends reaching out to me and asking me to talk them down from taking their lives. I had friends that cut themselves and were also depressed, and I think back to that time now, and it's hard to imagine the weight all of that carried on me. Right? And I think now, like where I'm at in my career, how I approach these conversations with students. And it's something that's never truly left. And I think that is something that has weighed heavily on my mental health ever since then, whether I realize it or not. And, I think about it now, and of course it weighs on me, right? I could have said one wrong thing when I was younger and could have lost a friend. Thankfully that didn't happen, but ninth grade was a really, really important time in my life and understanding who I was and who I was going to be. As I said, I was still a chunky boy, was still getting bullied by people in the grade above. And then 10th grade hit. 10th grade, I think for me, is one of the larger turning points I've had in my life, especially in high school. And I say that because in 10th grade, it is when my high school established a boys varsity soccer team for the first time in a long time. And, I had played soccer growing up. I didn't play club or anything. I had played AYSO, but I still enjoyed it. I didn't want to play football, but I still wanted to do something in the fall. And I really wanted a varsity letter, which, I never actually bought a varsity jacket, but, here we are. Varsity jackets are stupid, by the way. And so 10th grade year, I joined the soccer team. And I still remember what conditioning looked and felt like. Like, that's how much of an impact that it made in my mind, and made in my life, that this is still something that I think about. And I'm like, man, if I could go back and do that conditioning again now, one, I'd probably have a heart attack. But two, like, I would probably lose just as much weight. And that's something that I think about, because I have never been worked so hard in my life. I remember going to conditioning before the season started, for like 2 hours a day, like 2 or 3 hours a day, for like 3 weeks. And it would consist of drills. It would consist of running hills. It would consist of doing what we called the Dryden Mile, which was just like a super lengthy run around the property of our high school. And the person in back would have to run to get in front of the person in front, and then again the next person that was now in back had to do the same. So it would just continue, and you would do this around the length of the property. And so it was important for you all to keep the same speed and the same momentum while you were running. And I think that is what got me into such great shape. Was like it was just consistent running. And but at the time, like it sucked. And I remember one of the training day or one of the days that we had during that 3 weeks, there was one specific day that there was like 6 of us throwing up in the weeds because of stuff that because it was like right after dinner time. And I remember one night that I had spaghetti before conditioning, and never again will I ever eat spaghetti before any major workout because it was tough. It was not fun. It was not fun. And these are things that I remember because they made that impact in my life. And you know, soccer my sophomore year really put me on a path to being more confident, feeling like I could, speak to women and do all these things, and because I was losing weight, like I legitimately looked skinny, and I look back at pictures, and my neck was so terribly skinny, like it was crazy. And I think 10th grade year, I started dating this girl that lived in Royal Oak. And so it was a pretty decent drive. We actually met through one of my best friend's cousins. And we had our first date where our parents dropped us off at the mall. And we just clicked. Now I do think that relationship, oh god, what's the word I want to use? Tainted me. I don't know if tainted is the right word I want to use, but that is the first relationship I had ever been sexual in. And it sounds weird to like say that and look back at it because I was still in high school, but I remember two examples of this relationship that I think really got me into a position of like really moving into a different part of my life. Was I was at her house and there was a park right down the street, and we went to the park and we're making out on top of one of the like jungle gym systems while there were kids around. And I'm like thinking about that now, like that is really weird. Like it was really really weird. But also I think of there are some stories with this I can't tell. Because my mom would completely disown me if I talked about some of these things. But there was a time that her and I were up in my room, and this was at the time where my mom was like, "You're not allowed to take girls into your room and close the door." And I was like, "Okay, like whatever, mom." You know, she was protecting me, and I get that. But we had closed the door, and then like one thing led to another, and the next thing I know, my mom is like yelling for my name. Like her top was off, like behind, like she hid behind the door. My mom was starting to walk up the stairs, and I like very much so remember this moment. And like I could relive every second of that situation in my head. And my mom enjoys watching my podcast, so she's gonna probably be like, "Oh, I don't remember that." But that was a time when my parents would have to drive me to go on dates. And that is such a weird thing to think about. Like, that is, like, so awkward. Like, up until the point that you can drive, like, those relationships, and anytime that you hang out with somebody, like, that is so weird. Like, you would have to call your mom or call your parents if, like, you want to stay a little bit longer. I remember, like, I had friends who I would go to their houses a lot, or they'd come over to mine, and we'd get to a point of, like, okay, so we're trying to hang out some more, and we would call our parents and be like, hey, can we stay a little bit longer? And then there'd be times where they'd be like, no, I'm actually already on the way. So I was like, but please? Like, I remember these conversations so vividly. And, like, I was pretty thankful because my parents were very much so like, yeah, like, keep, hanging out. Like, that's fine. We don't have anything to do. And thankful for that because they invested in my social life, which is pretty cool. So into also, in that time period, I remember dating a multitude of women. A good amount that I actually met through church and through going to church camp. And I will say this, and I don't say this to generalize a group of individuals, and I probably didn't need to give that warning, but from the experiences that I had, like the girls that I met through church and through church camp were probably some of the freakiest girls that I've ever met. I don't know what the correlation is there, if there is a correlation, but those relationships were something else. Especially around that time when, you're going through puberty and you're like, oh yeah, this want to do this thing, or I don't even know what this is. And you would brag to your friends that, like, you did this, or then they'd brag like, oh, but I did this. And I was a player. I got around. Now, I don't say I got around sexually, but, like, I just dated a lot of people. Like, I had a different relationship, like, every month. I was dating a new girl. Just because I knew so many girls. And, I had this newfound confidence. Like, I had been playing soccer. Like, I was looking fit. Like, I was pulling off these styles. Like, I was the hot shit. Like, my friends would be like, wait, you're dating somebody new? And I'd be like, yep. Oh my god. That was a time. What happened to those days? I don't even know. I got old. I got fat, but it's fine. Um, but then 11th grade came, and, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, and, I'm starting to look at colleges, and, at that point in time, church was very, very heavy still in my life. I was looking at those that made an impact on me, and what I was looking to go to college for was to be a pastor. I was like, oh, I could be a youth pastor and then become the pastor of the church. And this is what I wanted to do. So I was looking at colleges that were religious. I was looking at colleges that were private. I had applied to quite a few of them and had gotten in, and that was my junior year. Like, that is what I wanted to do. Meanwhile, like, I still wasn't perfect, but, like, I was all about Jesus. Like, I had quotes of the Bible on my wall. Like, I, was going to church, being at the church, multiple days a week, and slandering people on face. I don't know, was Facebook then, or was it some MySpace? One of the two. I was slandering people for not believing in Jesus and trying to understand why they didn't believe in a God, and let them know the shit that they're doing was wrong. And I was one of those kids. That was me. I wore a cross necklace, and I was all about Jesus. Let me tell you, Jesus was the homeboy, and then senior year came. So senior year was something. I ended up dating one of my best friends' sisters, who was also my ex, and this was like the most serious relationship I had had it up to that point. Her and I were together for about a year, but that time period really changed my life. So I was a senior, she was a sophomore. Our parents really, what's the word I want to use? We're straight helicopter parents to us, which is understandable. Like, I get it. But it was to the point where, like, her parents did not want her hanging out with me. I don't know why. Her parents were very, would go back and forth on whether or not they liked me. And I had known them for a long, long time. But in all due respect, like, it makes sense because I was 2 years older than her. I was getting ready to go to college, and I was trying to figure my life out, as much as one 17-year-old does, at that given point. But also, like, this is the girl that, like, we both lost our virginities to each other in high school. And I feel like our parents knew. I feel like they knew, and I'll be interested to see when my mom listens to this on if she knew or not. She'll probably be like, "Oh, I had my suspicions, or I knew all along." I guarantee that she says some shit like that. But ironically enough, I lost my virginity in the backseat of my car, in the parking lot of a hardware store called the Do It Center. So that was super ironic. And the crazy thing after that is her and we had a pregnancy scare. My mom definitely doesn't know about that. So, Mom, I had a pregnancy scare in high school. Now you know. But we were also on our way to a bowling fundraiser when this happened. And I remember this because there was one of the dads of my friends that I went to church with came up to me and asked me what I was doing parked in that parking lot with my girlfriend. I said, "Oh, yeah, we were just talking." He fucking knew. Like, he knew I was lying. Like, who am I to be like, "God, I'm sorry. My pubescent tendencies got to me, and one thing led to another. I just happen to have, this condom in my middle compartment." Like, no, like, I'm not. Like, so I'm sitting there, and like this whole time at this bowling fundraiser, I'm like, oh my god, how many other people know that this happened? And then the pregnancy scare thing happened, and I was like, fuck. Now more people know. And in a small town, word travels, and here we are. And so I say all that because that relationship really made me question the idea of like adultery, the idea of like not giving yourself to somebody until marriage. Like, I respect people that do that, but at the same time, like, shit, what if like you marry somebody and the sex is absolutely horrendous because neither of you know what the fuck you're doing? Like, that's got to be miserable for the rest of your life. Like, I can't even imagine. And so I respect it, but also, you know, at the end of the day, like, you just got to do it. Like, do it before you get married. I'm telling you right now. But that that off on it, that is a completely different tangent for a different TEDx and different time. I can see the title of it now. Have sex before you get married, or it'll be terrible the rest of your life. That's going to be the name of my TEDx. Thank you for coming, and see what I did there. I don't know what this podcast has turned into, but my senior year, a lot of things changed. So I went into that relationship. I was in it for the entirety of my senior year. Things at church had changed. The pastor that I had fallen in love with, for lack of a better phrase, that has been there to support me through so many things, who I had since I was in 7th grade, going to youth group, was the youth pastor, and then transitioned into the pastor of the church. He had left the church, and we got a new pastor, and I all of a sudden could not relate to this one as much. And it was a struggle. It was really hard. Because I was like, man, like, all of this stuff is happening. Why is this happening? Like, why is, like, God allowing this to happen? Like, all of this stuff. And that was the turning point for me. Because I also had a conversation with my mom where she said, you know, pastors don't make very much money. And I was like, they make enough. She's like, well, do they? I was like, well, you get a house if you're a pastor. And she's like, okay, well, how are you going to afford the things that you want to do? And I was like, I'll find a way. I've always been one to be like, I'll find a way. If I can make it happen, I'll make it happen. But that conversation stuck with me because I like material things. I've always liked material things. I've gotten a lot better recently, which I'll talk about in a future podcast episode, but I liked the idea of owning stuff. And so being a pastor was not gonna pay for that. And, you know, my family has always been one to be like, oh, you are so good at math and science, like, you should be a doctor, like, you'll do great, like, you'll make a lot of money. And I was sold. I was like, if my family wants me to be a doctor, I'll be a doctor. And so my whole senior year flipped my life upside down. I went from wanting to be a pastor to wanting to go to college to be a doctor. Plus, I was in this relationship that was like my first full, like, sexual relationship. And so things had changed. I was like, what, how am I going to speak to kids at youth group about being abstinent and about, you know, living out your dreams if I'm not doing that myself? And so I only applied to one school outside of the religious institutions that I had applied for. And that was Oakland University of Michigan, which is where I ended up going. But at that time, while I was in high school, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier, this was also a time where my dad was struggling to find work in Michigan. And so when I was in eighth or ninth grade, my dad had moved to Illinois to work. And he did so for 5 years. He worked over there for 5 years, and he missed a lot of sporting events. He missed a lot of different experiences that I had, from school dances to prom. He was at my high school graduation, but that was the last graduation he would be at. And I'll talk about that in the next episode, because surprise, YouTube, this is going to a third part in the series. So this will be a 3-part series, because I'm not going to get to everything that I want to talk about today. And so that really affected me too. Like, not having my dad around in high school and some of the most important times of my life, and it really just being my mom and I through a lot of different things. And my mom was trying to figure out what she was going to do for work. She was nannying for these 3 kids that were always at our house, like 4 days a week. And I was still playing sports. I was playing soccer. I quit basketball my senior year because I hated the coach. And I was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. And then I quit baseball my senior year as well, just because I really just wanted to focus time on spending time with my girlfriend and playing soccer. And my senior year of soccer was the best that our team had ever done. We went to districts. We ended up playing the number 1 team in the state. I was elected to the all-state team, all academic state team. So like, I was living the dream. Like, my senior year playing soccer was great. We did the best in school history that we've ever done. And I considered playing soccer in college. Like, I had schools that I just squeaked really bad. I had schools that I was looking at playing for soccer. But this was also along the time that I was still debating on if I wanted to be a pastor or not. And then, as I said, all of that changed. And so the end of my senior year happened. Prom happened, graduation happened, graduation parties happened. And then I remember it almost being time to move into college. And I'm going to end here very shortly. I'm going to end on this last note, because I think this is also something that really changed me going into college and my experience. So my girlfriend at the time, that I had been with the entirety of my senior year, we had gotten into this massive argument. And I accused her of cheating, which wasn't great. But there was some real sus behavior going on, so I feel like I had a lot of right in doing so. And then a few weeks before I get ready to move into college, she breaks up with me because she thinks that I'm going to go to college and cheat on her. Excuse me? Hello? Okay. I've given you nothing but my love. And here we are. I'm going to college single. And now that is really that is a really important thing to mention as we go into the next episode is how being single in college changed a lot of things for me. And y'all are gonna get some stories that I've never told people in this podcast. Y'all are gonna get some great insight into what the start of college was like for me, and how some of the most influential and some of my best friends came into my life, because that took place in college. And that's all gonna be in that next episode. And so I'm excited to share the last 8 years with you in the next podcast. So if you made it this far, I appreciate you for continuing on this journey, continuing on my rant in my wayward soul, in rediscovering my life story and why I started this journey. If you've made it this far, please like and subscribe. There are people watching this that aren't subscribing to the channel. It is free to subscribe. And we'll see you next week. And please remember, for the love of humankind, respect each other, love each other, and learn a little bit more about those that are in your life. Because you never know what secrets they hold. We'll see you next week.